James MacLaine was born in the year 1724, most likely in County Monaghan, Ireland. Information on MacLaine's early life is limited, but we know that his mother died when he was just a young teenager. Fortunately, his father, an Irish Presbyterian minister, provided James and his elder brother with a stable upbringing. From a young age, the boys were raised with religious values and both received a decent education. James learnt Latin and was able to read and write at a high level. This was in preparation for his future career as a merchant. The problem was that James wasn't a very hard worker, and he disregarded a lot of what his father tried to teach him. When he was just 18, his father died unexpectedly, leaving him to fend for himself. His elder brother had followed in his father's footsteps and was already working as a Presbyterian minister. Instead of using his inheritance wisely, MacLaine wasted it on gambling, prostitutes, and fine clothing. He even sold his father's books, proving his immaturity and lack of drive. Following his father's death, he spent his time wooing many young ladies that lived nearby. He was a handsome young man and used his good looks to get into bed with the daughters of his neighbours. MacLaine's actions led to him being heavily criticised in his area and by his brother. To get a fresh start, he left for England and eventually arrived in London. Once there, it wasn't long till he met a woman named Miss MacLaine. At the beginning, he wasn't very interested in her, but when he learnt that her father was a respectable innkeeper and horse dealer, he knew that if he married her, he could have a comfortable life. It's likely that he married her for economic reasons, as she had a dowry of £500, something that the penniless MacLaine was very interested in. Despite not marrying for love, the marriage was presumably happy, as there's no records of infidelity, violence, or anger between the couple. After the marriage, MacLaine got his first ever and last ever proper job, becoming a grocer on Welbeck Street. He did the job well and was recognised as being diligent and considerate in his work. All seemed like James MacLaine had a happy life, like any other. However, this was all to change. His wife was very ill. To try and nurse her back to health, they hired an Irish apothecary named William Plunkett. He attended to her to the best of his abilities, but she didn't recover and eventually died. MacLaine had been married to his wife for 3 years and was very upset by her passing. To try and make MacLaine feel better, Plunkett told him that he could find him a very wealthy woman to marry, worth at least £10,000. After some time, MacLaine took him up on his offer and aimed to better his social position by marrying into wealth. Accompanied by Plunkett acting as his servant, the pair made their way to the city of Wales in Somerset. Apparently, Plunkett had already arranged the marriage, but while they were in a tavern, MacLaine got into a fight and was recognised. As the locals now knew his true identity, he couldn't follow through with the marriage. They returned to London as soon as possible. By this point, MacLaine was fed up by his lack of success in England, so he saved up money to travel to Jamaica. The night before the boat set sail, he was feeling rather lucky and tried his chances at gambling. MacLaine lost all the money that he had saved up, and he was now penniless. At this point, Plunkett was also bankrupt, and he convinced MacLaine to join him in a life of crime as highwayman. Evidently, MacLaine was nervous about robbing people. He wasn't raised to do such things. This may have been what led to him fleeing from his first robbery, a bad start for his criminal career. However, following this, the pair started to make a living from their activities. They hid their faces with Venetian masks and used horses and pistols to intimidate their victims. They confined their activities to the area of Hyde Park, and within 6 months, they committed 20 hold-ups, becoming known highwaymen in London. Despite being a criminal, MacLaine upheld some of the principles his father taught him early on in life. During the robberies, he was always well-mannered and calm towards his victims, wishing them no harm. This led to his nickname, the Gentleman Highwayman. The money that he acquired was always immediately spent. With his newfound wealth, he was finally able to live the life of a rich Londoner, like he had always wanted. While at the height of his highwayman career, MacLaine left London and went to visit his brother in Hague, in the Netherlands. While he was there, he became liked among the locals, and they were very hospitable towards him. But following his departure, many people noticed a strange disappearance of valued items around their house, a theft most likely committed by MacLaine. With MacLaine back in London, he continued his life as a highwayman, and in 1749 he committed one of his most famous robberies. While following his usual route of Hyde Park, he crossed paths with Horace Walpole. He was successful in many areas of life, being an English writer, art historian, man of letters, antiquarian, and Whig politician. Furthermore, he was the 4th Earl of Orford, in other words, an extremely wealthy aristocrat. MacLaine stopped Walpole and showed his pistol in order to intimidate him and secure valuable loot. Unfortunately, during the hold-up, MacLaine accidentally fired his gun. This was the only time that MacLaine ever used his pistol. The bullet didn't hurt anyone, and it went out flying through the top of the stagecoach, but the explosion from the gunshot burnt Walpole's face. The Gentleman Highwayman was shocked by what had happened. He never intended on hurting anybody, so he lived up to his name and wrote Walpole a letter apologising for what had happened. In June 1750, Plunkett and MacLaine changed their route and held up a stagecoach in Hounslow Heath. Among the 6 passengers on board was a man named Lord Eglinton. The name Eglinton is a noble title of the peerage from Scotland. The robbery was standard for the pair, but the keen eye of a shopkeeper led to their downfall. MacLaine attempted to sell the stolen goods in Monmouth Street in Covent Garden to a shop owner named Mr. Loader. He bought some of the goods off MacLaine, but then he noticed a unique golden coat that he sold a few weeks prior. Mr. Loader grew suspicious of MacLaine. A warrant for his arrest was issued, and it wasn't long until the Gentleman Highwayman was apprehended. Shortly after this, items belonging to Lord Eglinton and others from the recent robbery in Hounslow Heath were found at his house. The loot found at his accommodation was arranged to show just how much he had stolen. MacLaine fell apart and started to weep, as he knew there was little chance for escape and regretted everything. In an attempt to save his own life, he even offered to provide evidence against his associate, Plunkett. However, this was denied. Seeing as he was in no position to lie, he made a full confession. He was tried at the Old Bailey for the robbery of the stagecoach in Hounslow Heath. Due to his position in high society, many were eager to attend the trial. It was almost as if it was treated as a social event. It's even estimated that during his imprisonment at Newgate, he received around 3,000 visitors, all hoping for his release. At the trial, many of his lady friends were saddened by what was going on, and some even cried for MacLaine. Despite MacLaine's actions, he had many supporters who didn't want to see him face the death penalty. In spite of his popularity, MacLaine was found guilty and sentenced to death. Following the trial, many people demanded that the conviction be changed. These petitions asked that he be saved from the gallows. There was even a formal appeal for mercy, written by a friend of his. Unfortunately, the document was never delivered. Although MacLaine had many supporters, the sentence was final. Any changes could have set a bad example for future criminals. On the 3rd of October 1950, on a cold winter's morning, MacLaine was transported from Newgate Prison to the gallows at Tyburn. With him travelled two others, William Smith and a man known as Sanders, after having been sentenced for forgery and thieving respectively. At the hanging, MacLaine said, "May God forgive my enemies and receive my soul." The hangman, Mr. John Thrift, did his duty, and all three passed away. MacLaine's body was buried in the town of Uxbridge in West London. Despite MacLaine's tragic passing, his old accomplice, William Plunkett, managed to escape with his life and earnings. Plunkett was fortunate enough to never go to trial in connection with the robberies, despite being the more serious highwayman of the two. According to History of Wyoming, in a series of letters written by Charles Minor, Plunkett fled London after MacLaine's hanging and made it to America. In 1775, while in America, he became known as Colonel William Plunkett and commanded battalions of the Northumberland militia in Lycoming County, Pennsylvania. Minor also states that Plunkett became a magistrate in Pennsylvania. Apparently, many people in America recognized him, and he was widely accepted as MacLaine's former partner. Colonel William Plunkett died in 1791 at the very old age of 100. However, it's uncertain whether they were really the same person, as this would have made William Plunkett 60 years old during the robberies and around 85 when he led the militia. Perhaps it was the same man, but the age of death was exaggerated. It's something that we will never know. Thank you everyone for watching this video on James MacLaine and William Plunkett. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and also comment down below if you think it was the same William Plunkett. Anyway, that's all from me, so I will see you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.